All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time on this Monday evening. We know that is a really busy time of year for everyone, so we thank you all so much for being here. My name is Jordan Silva. I'm the Assistant Director for the EDL program, and I'm so excited because tonight we're leading an event in partnership with Rossier Career Services, and it's our resume tune-up event. This session is going to be recorded. So tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll be emailing all of you the recording and some post-event instructions if you want an alumni review of your resume. The alumni review option is great if you're interested because you'll get a review of your resume with some of the tools and tips that you're able to integrate today into that edited resume, and you'll be able to get it reviewed by an alumni. This is not only great networking, but it also just helps you create the best resume possible, which is really our goal today hosting this event. So we have two EdD programs that partner together on this event. The EdD in Educational Leadership, which we can see in the chat, about half of you are from our EDL program. So hello, our EDL friends, and our EdD in Organizational Change and Leadership, our OCL program. The EDL and OCL program are both EdD programs. Our EDL students are a mix of on-campus and online, and our OCL folks are completely online. And career planning is, we hope, going to be a vital part of your program, and it's going to help you help set you up for success as you move throughout the program. So our goal with this program and with programs to come is to just provide opportunities for really impactful networking, and that you can start thinking of your career interests and your goals and how we can help you make those happen, whether that's in the program or after the program as well. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our speaker and workshop leader for this evening, Dr. Ryan Alcantara. Ryan is Rossier's fantastic career services manager, and we're so excited to partner with him. As a native Californian, he earned a PhD in public administration from the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy, an MA in educational leadership from the University of Connecticut at Storrs, and a BS in psychobiology from the University of California at Riverside. It's quite the resume. A dynamic student-centered leader, Ryan has 25 years of experience in education with a strong commitment to educational equity and social justice. He also serves as an adjunct faculty member here at Rossier and also at USC Price. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Ryan.
Thank you, Jordan. My pleasure to be here with everybody. And let's jump into the slides, but just a little bit more on my background. So I approach career services manager from a higher ed perspective. That's where I spent most of my career. But of course, some of the things that we're going to be covering tonight translate, but certainly what we're looking to accomplish with the alumni pairing is to connect you with industry expertise as well. So without further ado, we'll jump into the slides. So one of the messages I like to share with our students at Rossier is don't forget career prep. And so, you have a sense of what your priorities are in preparing for that next step. Many of you have a clear idea of what that might be. Some of you may be looking at various options. And so for some of you, that time is right around the corner, and others have a few more years. So it really is important to be thinking about that career journey and what that means for you, and to structure time to respond to it. So today we're going to be focused in on that written U piece, and specifically resumes. But like I said, it's really, really important to be sure that you are kind of structuring time, particularly if you're anticipating a career pivot, or you need some particular attention in things like your resume or interview skills. So I want to start with some of the basics, and they may not be basics for everyone, but the formatting of a resume. What I like to say is keep it simple. If you were to type into templates of MS Word or Microsoft Word, you get all sorts of what I'll say is cutesy templates, many of which feature pictures. Don't do it. These these are not the way you should be structuring your resume. We have a template that you can use. It's on the Career Services, Rossier Career Services page. Unless you have specific guidance from your industry and folks in your industry that say to do something different, keeping it simple and clean is the way to go with your resume. And I say this from having worked with many students, and not everybody knows that approach. Again, there could be some exceptions, and if you're in graphic design or somewhere else, that may dictate some other things. But by and large, you want a simple kind of approach. So a little bit on what a resume is and what it is not. So it's your first impression. The goal is obviously to secure the interview, get through that next stage, so that they can meet you. You have to expect that it's only going to be viewed 8 to 15 seconds. And this is where keeping it simple and clean and crisp is particularly important, because reviewers are going through a lot of these, or the AIs that they use. And so if you have some weird formatting and they have trouble finding something, it's going to make it difficult for you to be successful in conveying the information that you want. It's also a marketing tool to sell to potential employers. What it's not is your life story. It's not a personal statement. It's not centered around you, but it's centered around what your potential employers need to know about you. And so that's an area that folks struggle in on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So major components: personal data, career objectives. Some people have some sort of summary at the top. I'm not a big fan of that, but again, it depends on your personal preferences. The other thing is educational background and related certificates. Some people include their dates of degree, some don't. And that's a little bit of a personal preference. Professional experience is probably going to be the biggest area, the most important part of your resume. That appears in reverse chronological order. The most important bullets should be at the top of that, generally no more than 4 or 5 bullets. But it's not comprehensive. And it's really, really important that you tailor it to the job that you seek. And so the interest is to be sure that you don't try, and this is where we sometimes have trouble, we do all this important work in the roles that we have, feeling the need to convey that in our resume to every employer. And so you want to make sure this isn't, really everything you've done in that role, but it's what's most relevant to the position that you're applying for. Including quantifiable data and accomplishments is helpful. So if there's numbers, the number of people you've supervised, the size of the budget, your impact in terms of again, numbers, being able to convey that's important. Other categories to consider: volunteer experience, leadership roles, honors and awards, teaching experience, presentations, publications, media, and special skills. So all of these can be conveyed in different ways. And so oftentimes when I'm talking to students, the question is like, what's the right way? Just give me the shortcut of what makes the most sense. And so I want to talk a little bit more about making those hard decisions. So like, what sections should I have? How long should my resume be? How far back do I go in my award or history awards or history? Do I need to have separate versions for every resume, for every job I apply to? What should I always include? What should I exclude? So unfortunately, it depends, but we will talk through what that means in that it depends. It really, you want some guidance from folks that are hiring. And this is where it's important to do that networking and to get some insights from others in the field, and to look at if you have access to other resumes, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it depends on your individual history. It depends on the industry you're applying to. Some of us may not have a lot of publications, right? You may not have a lot of media, but you may have a couple. And so an approach might be to group things together. And so you have media and publications under one section, and that fills it out nicely. I like to use the term selected. So that conveys that it may not include everything. So there's no real hard and fast rules in it. Again, the most important part where people are going to spend the most time in reviewing your resume are on those professional experiences. The other things, it just has to be logical enough that they can go through it and understand. Don't let great or perfect be the enemy of good. And so what does that mean? We oftentimes lament and spend a whole lot of time trying to make this perfect. You have to watch for typos. You don't want typos on your resume, but whether you have 5 bullet points or 7 bullet points, you just have a trouble bringing down those last two. Um, it's not a deal breaker. You want to be sure to put together as strong of a product as possible, have it well laid out, and convey those important messages. But again, if you're having difficulty in applying, the rules of thumb, know that it doesn't have to be perfect. There's lots of different interpretations to what makes a solid resume. Follow the rule of relevance. And so you want to make it relevant. And so this kind of goes into that question of, do I need to modify my resume for each job I apply to? So it depends, are these similar jobs in that I have relevant experience in one job, applies to these two different positions. So if you're looking for jobs in higher education and they're two similar institutions, similar type of roles, you can turn in the same kind of resume. But if you have very different positions that you're applying to, a director of communications versus a director of enrollment, you're going to highlight different things in your past. And it's not that you're necessarily excluding positions, but you may decide differently what position goes first and how many responsibilities tied to a particular role you want to include. And so that relevance should be the guide in making that determination. Again, remembering 15 seconds or less they spend on it. And so it doesn't mean that that's the only amount of time that somebody reviewing your resume spends, but in those 8 to 15 seconds, they're going to decide if I want to spend more time on it. Is it speaking to the roles and responsibilities of this position? So the goal is how can I stand out? How can I pique the interest of the reviewer so that my resume gets more time? That's what you're trying to achieve. How do you judge effectiveness of your resume? Are you getting interviews is really the big measure. This is the written you. You're going to have an opportunity to convey your experiences through the spoken you through an interview. So if you find, I'm getting a lot of requests for an interview, but I'm not making it the second interview, you may not need to spend so much time on modifying your resume. You've got to work on your interview skills. So again, it's identifying, where you need to spend most of your time. And the final thing I would say is seeking feedback. And so we'll have that baked into our program here with pairing you with alumni to give you that feedback. I'm certainly available. As USC students, you have access to our USC Career Center. For those in the 2U programs, you have access to some career counselors at 2U too. Take advantage of those. Talk to people, get different perspectives. Like I said, there's not one way of doing it, so you may get different feedback from different people you speak to. But another, certainly your supervisor, if you feel comfortable having conversations with your supervisor. And another thing to consider is LinkedIn as an option. So a little bit on LinkedIn. So everybody should have a LinkedIn profile that's very useful as you're going through a job search. You want to make sure to keep that updated, particularly if you're in the midst of a job search. And that means the information is up to date, but you're also engaging in that community. You've got recent posts, you're reacting to posts. That's part of what your kind of time you should be spending on the job search process. It can certainly mirror your resume, those bullet points that you have, but it can also be more dynamic. You can have links to some of the content you have, or embedded videos, or other documents. It's a networking tool, but it can also be a resume resource because we use our resume to populate LinkedIn. If you're struggling with like what's the most important responsibility for a superintendent to list on their resume, looking for some superintendents and seeing what information they convey. You don't want to copy their information, but it can guide you to say, what are the most relevant pieces in this particular job track that I'm considering. So, taking advantage of LinkedIn as that resource to see insights into all kinds of different people's resumes is useful. What language do they use? What level of specificity do they provide? All of that can be helpful in making that determination of whether you have the right language or not. I've got a link down here, and you'll get a copy of the presentation with links activated. So if you need a primer on LinkedIn, that's available to you there. Okay,
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let's kind of stop and see if we've got any questions before we go into small group. And I will, let me stop sharing at this point and we could see each other here. So that was a lot of information, and my hope is, that may be a little bit of a review for some of you, but hopefully it sparks some questions. And so as you saw, the next step is we want to have some conversation, but let's get some of the questions that may have come up in the chat or that folks want to share.
Yes, I'm so sorry to interrupt you too. I had a student message me, and I think when you were sharing your screen just now, it was sharing the notes. No worries. It was probably just helpful potentially for everyone to read them when you're presenting. But when we send out the recording, we can figure that out. Any questions? Let me just check the chat box really quick. Well, does look like we have quite a few EDL and OCL students. We had about a even split RSVP. Does anyone have any questions before we start with the breakout rooms? Okay.
Jennifer.
Oh.
So I just had a question in terms of keywords, or do you have any history with OCL students? I'm in the OCL program, and I'm in the corporate sector. And so in terms of kind of next steps post graduation, are there any keywords that should be included in a resume that will provide an advantage for OCL students or EDDs or on the education side? And do you have any experience with that?
I will say it's really industry specific. So you have to be using language that the industry utilizes. And so I'll put this up. It's in a later slide. We have VMOC, which is AI technology that students have access to. It actually has a feature of when you have a resume uploaded, it can compare that to a job position. So you can upload a job position and it will look at it. So that's going to be more of a determinant than necessarily your academic program, because you're trying to sell that information to folks in the industry. I will say most typically the types of things you really want to emphasize as you're making that jump to, your kind of doctoral, that next position. Oftentimes, there's budget and HR are two of the key areas that folks, if you're going into a management role, and so you want to be able to speak the language of, I've supervised staff, I've managed budgets, and being able to communicate that. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And one other piece that I'll put out there is the ability to do research. And again, that means different things in different settings, but that's a skill that you're developing. And again, industry is going to dictate how that becomes relevant. So, the critical thinking and ability to identify a problem and work through that solution would probably be that key factor that you're trying to show. like, look, I don't just have an EdD, but I have that depth and that experience of solving real world problems. Stefani?
Gwen ruined it for me. It's Stephanie. But
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you. No worries. So my question is really around tips for wanting to pivot maybe into a different industry, like once I uh, uh, finish here and have my EDD. So I would love any um, wisdom or tips on how to best cater a resume when you're seeking to do that.
Great, and that's a great question, Stephanie. I will say one of the most important things you need to do if you're looking at a pivot is building that network in that new space. And so having folks that you are developing relationships that can help you to make sure you're using that language, because that, using the right language is very important. But connecting with those folks, being sure that you can demonstrate and connect the dots between your prior experience and that new role. So that becomes an important thing. And the other thing, like I mentioned with LinkedIn, looking at LinkedIn to see kind of how are they explaining that on their resume, and how can you translate that. Now what's important to realize when you're doing that pivot, you're not trying to exactly kind of reflect or mirror what folks that may have longer history in that industry. You want to show the value of your pivot. So I've done this, and now I can bring this into to this new sector. So it requires a little bit of nuances in language, but again, building that network is going to be really, really critical, and starting that process now is particularly important.
Thank you.
And then in terms of just integrating that, again, selecting those experiences that are most important. So oftentimes, if it was a few jobs ago, you're not going to have more bullet points associated with it, but that might be really important in the pivot. I mean, you may be in some ways pivoting back to something, so that becomes more relevant. And those are the things you certainly want to showcase in your cover letters. Good. Are there other questions?
We have a couple of questions in the chat box. If you want me to read them out, Ryan.
Sure, that'd be great.
Is there any special way to post on LinkedIn? How often do you need to post, or should we just be visible?
It like everything, it depends. I think a rule of thumb is allocating a certain amount of time each week, and that could be an hour, it could be 30 minutes, it could be I'll post something once a week, and just to have a presence there is helpful. Networking via LinkedIn requires more time and the ability to find people that you want to try to connect with, send them messages, and then wait to hear back. So again, if you're looking at that career pivot, you may want to spend an hour looking for people and trying to connect with them, or finding emails and directly emailing them. But it just, in terms of its use in your job search, it's just something each week is useful. Don't let it distract you from applying to jobs and working on your cover letter. Like every social media, it can kind of pull at you, and you come to find out you're spending way too much time there. But it is helpful because it is helping you build connections, and people will look at that and they will see, oh yeah, you've got people responding to them. If you've got influencers that you're following, or institutions that you're particularly interested in, understanding what their leaders are following are going to be useful as you go through the job search.
Next question, how many years of work experience should be on your resume?
Oftentimes the rule of thumb is 10 years. I say that, and I go further back with mine, but part of it is just your ability. Are you a bit of a hoarder, or are you you want a clean house kind of perspective? Knowing if you do have things past that 10 years, folks aren't probably going to look at it, and unless it's really, really relevant, that's not useful. Or sometimes you may have been at it in an institution for 10 or 12 years, and so you want to go at least back to a couple of positions. So listing an older thing, but you only have a really brief description associated with it, you really just want to be spending less real estate on those items. But anything past 10 years is probably questionable.
Great. And the last question we have in the chat for now is, where is the resume template?
The resume template, I will put it in the chat. It's on actually, we'll have it in one of the later slides. There's a resume link, a link to the resource at the Rossier Career Network. So I'm sorry, the Rossier Career Services page. So you'll have that in the slides. Great. Okay, so let me make sure I am sharing this properly. So we have some questions. Actually, why don't we do this? I will put the questions in the chat so that people can see it. We want to give you an opportunity to kind of to think through this. And I thought that doing this in small groups might be kind of the best way. So what I have are 3 questions that we want to put you in groups of 3 to 5, and you'll have a few minutes to discuss this. And my hope is it might spark some additional questions or issues. But the questions are, where do you feel your resume is, kind of based on what we've discussed and what your feeling was prior? Perfect, or does it need some work? Do you need to trim? And so are you clear on how to do that? And then based on the job you are seeking, do you expect you will need multiple versions of your resume? So I want you to kind of think through those items in small groups, and then we can kind of report back in the larger group and see if there's additional questions. Jordan, are we ready to break off into small groups? You're on mute.
Of course. I just created the breakout groups. So we'll divide you up into groups of about 3 or 4. So you can join your room right now. And Ryan, when would you like me to broadcast to everyone with maybe like a 2-minute warning?
Let's give them 5 minutes. And then we'll see what questions we have coming back. Okay, welcome back. And observations out of the small group or questions that may have come up where folks are like, not sure maybe how to trim or other guidance that you can use. Oh, how many sentences per bullet point? I think generally you want to keep it to 1 or 2 sentences, taking up no more than 1 or 2 lines. But again, with the relevancy. So there's the caveat, if you can combine a couple of bullet points and use fewer lines, then it makes sense to do that. That can make that's okay to do. But usually, you don't want to pack in a whole lot of stuff under a bullet point. Denise?
I'm not sure if this is a totally appropriate question, but we all kind of had the same concern in our group. We're looking to do something else, but we don't know exactly what. So do you have any advice about kind of researching fields or trying to figure out where to put our resume, or advice to find about other fields?
So you're looking to pivot, but you're not sure where you want to pivot to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, that is much more of a kind of career exploration piece. I have a couple of slides related to teaching. So oftentimes we have students in our EdD programs that say, I want to teach. Understanding you're not in a PhD program, but the doctorate does give you some of that leverage. So I'll go through kind of more specifically on that pivot to teaching. But you've got to be thinking like, what else can I do? And so I'm happy to sit down. I have spent time with individual both alums and students in our ED programs, kind of talking through the pivot. But you've got to start kind of considering, what kinds of roles do I anticipate? Is this within my industry? Am I looking at a completely different industry? You may be looking at, training might be a big area that people look at. I've done different levels of work within my industry, but this leadership is going to allow me to do more, perhaps on the HR side or employee development type of roles. Consulting is another big one. And we are having a conversation next month as it relates to consulting. So that'll be on October 23rd. We have a couple of our EdD graduates who are going to lead us in a conversation about consulting. But you've got to kind of think like, here are maybe 10, like what are the kinds of options I might be thinking about? And that may be how you want to structure and spend your time. How do I focus in on 3 or 5 of those? And then how do I network that? And who do I reach out to? I will say, remember, you are part of the USC family. And so, if your pivot, you don't anticipate within the education field, looking at those other colleges or schools, we've got like 22 different schools at USC. They may have events, they all have faculty, they've got research centers. So doing some time exploring those areas and building connections in other parts of SC is sometimes helpful. Good, very good question. Other questions? Okay, how to position your work experience versus education on the resume. I prefer education first. It takes up less space. You want to showcase the doctorate. You want to give information on your dissertation. That's up top. A lot of people say, and maybe some industries dictate, start with your experience and then the education comes later. I would err on the education first, especially knowing that you've got an EdD to add to that. So you want to be sure you reinforce that. Other questions? No? So generally, and we could do this with thumbs up. So are a lot of you thinking about pivots? Kind of, I see some head shaking, maybe. All right, some thumbs up. And what about teaching or university level teaching or college to university? A lot. Okay. Okay. So no, go ahead.
Going on your grandma.
Oh, Teresa. Okay. All right. I am going to share a few more slides and I'll do it the right way this time. Okay. You could just see my slide, right?
Correct. Looks great.
Okay. All right. So I mentioned VMOC. It's a resource. I tried this out and I'll say, so one of the great things about this is more and more we're seeing AI being utilized, at least an initial review or a way to upload an application. This is a great resource for undergrads. Because it'll measure and give you an instant score on feedback. I tried pushing my resume through this and to see what happened. I'll say some of us are a little bit more stubborn, and I want to format it this way. So I don't care that the AI is saying to do it this other way. But you may not have as high of a score. It didn't like having atypical section heads. And again, AIs might have trouble with that. People oftentimes can kind of sort through that. It definitely helps catching typos and grammatical errors. It can also identify overused words. Like I found out I use facilitate way too much. And is that the worst thing in the world? No. But it's again, can I use crisper language? Sure. Can you? So it'll give that guidance to organizational layout. And like I said, it doesn't like multiple categories, and it might not like some of them that we do. But it's a good resource to make sure, you know, generally structure makes sense, and to identify those typos to push it through. So when you do this as a student, you go in single sign-on. You can build a resume straight from here, or you can upload yours. And so, like I said, it gives you some measurements, and it's a good thing to check out. Resume versus CV. So this is my section talking a little bit about people interested in teaching in academia. So sometimes we use these terms interchangeably, but in academia, a CV is very different. And so a resume is a focused, focused, it's a summary, it's concise. A CV is comprehensive. You know, it has your exhaustive detail on anything you've taught, your research experience, teaching, academic presentations. It does look for a lot of things that many of us may not have a lot to put in there. So one of the things I advise, and I'll have some links to this on the next slide, is looking at samples and beginning to identify, like, what have I done that can fit in this category? So presentations, you may have done presentations. That's an easy fit. If you've done presentations as part of a job, like that could be included. Professional membership. If you need to do more publishing, but you can list blogs and other things. It may take some time to develop a strong CV, but a CV may not be necessary for all academic positions. And so that's important to keep in mind. And as you work to network and identify and talk to people that are doing the hiring, you can figure out whether or not it's going to be useful to invest time in that. So a few resources to point out. The Career Center has a resume CV resource and a few pages dedicated to CVs, so you can take a look at that. And there'll be a link on the handout that you receive. There's sample CVs both in the faculty directory for Rossier and the Rossier PhD student directory. If you just click on the name, many of them will say download CV. So not everybody has it, but many of them do. And that gives you a sense of what am I working towards. And then the Center for Excellence in Teaching hosts a number of institutes that are available to students, including a future faculty teaching institute. And they run those each semester. They're online. They're no additional cost. And the QR code takes you there if you want to take a look at that. And so it's a good way to network. It's a good way to put like a certificate on that you have some experience being trained in teaching in academia. What I'll say, because there was a lot of interest in CVs or in teaching, the way you get at least an adjunct job is by building relationships. Most often, they're looking for somebody. You can apply to a job, but they're really looking for people that they've met. So it's building those relationships, identifying where do I want to teach, maybe it's going in and doing guest lecturer options. Know as well that a lot of programs will hire adjuncts for their expertise, or the flip side is to fill in vacancies that they have in teaching. So they've got a longtime teacher that's bought out time to do research, and now they need those vacancies. Some of that stuff can happen quite suddenly. So building up kind of those connections so people know, oh, you know, your resume is sitting there as somebody that makes those hiring decisions, realizes, oh, I need to bring somebody in, but it takes time. And so that's where I encourage doing the networking, building those connections now, rather than waiting till, oh, now I have my degree, I'm going to start kind of marketing myself as an adjunct. That could be too late. Well, not that it's too late, but it's going to require time to build that network and for dividends to then be paid off in completing that process. Does that make sense? Do people have more questions about that? Okay, so the next few things are just resources. So as I pointed out, these are resume resources that you have access to. The top one is resume info that for Rossier Career Services. So that's my page. That'll take you to a template and you can build something straight from there. I like QR codes, sorry about that. Resume info at the Career Center, and so you have access to the Career Center. You can do drop-in advising at the Career Center. So if you want somebody to take a quick look at your resume, you can also reach out to me, but they've got multiple advisors that can look through that. Again, VMOC is featured here. For those of you in 2U programs, there's a guide and template link here, and know that you also have career counselors that you can access through 2U. I want to pivot real quick and review the alumni resume review process. So what we want to do is provide an opportunity to connect you with an alum, ideally as close to your industry as possible, to take a look at your resume and give you some feedback. And so that really helps you to build a new connection, but it also enables you to get some insight on your resume. So there's a few steps. You'll get an email outlining this later, but I wanted to walk through this again to see if there's questions that come up. So I am encouraging you to spend a little bit of time updating your resume before you do this. So you've got a little bit of time to work on that. There's a link here to submit your resume, and so it's your name and your resume, and you have until the morning of Monday, October 9th to do that. On October 9th, we will be sending out an invitation to anybody that submitted their resume to join the Rossier Alumni Resume Review Program, and that's part of the Rossier Career Network. And so that's our networking platform, and we're hosting this program within that. So if you've set up a profile, great. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. I know the invitation to this program had an opportunity to set that up. If you've got a LinkedIn page, super easy to set up your profile in that system. And that's single sign-on. So when you click that link, you can just use your single sign-on to join it. So on the 9th, you'll receive an email saying, you know, we've received your resume, and here's where you go to take part in this program. So you'll have to open that email, click join. If you're in the browser where you're in the Rossier Career Network, you're set. It'll take you right in there. It'll prompt you with a couple of questions that, like, what industry are you interested in, and what do you have background in? And that page will be your resource as you go through this matching process. So you complete that step 5, complete that brief survey on industries of interest. And then I'll say between 5 and 6, our mentors will be doing the same thing. And you'll be able to go in and identify mentors. And so you'll have the mentors in there, and you can favorite a couple of mentors. If you see somebody in there that you want to be paired with, we will be matching the automated matches. So that'll give us an opportunity to look through that. So if you go on there between the 9th and the 16th, you can see some alums that'll be participating, and that can influence how that match will work. So once you are matched, and that's ideally taking place on October 16th, you'll get a reminder, but you need to send an introductory email to your resume reviewer, including the position or positions you plan to pursue, with a copy of your resume. The copy of your resume you initially sent was to us as administrators for the program, but you'll actually send it directly to the alumni reviewer, and you'll be able to communicate with one another via the online system. And that'll help us track to make sure our students are responding, and then our alums are responding back with feedback, and that should come by November 13th. And so we are encouraging, this can all be done electronically, but we're encouraging you at least have one opportunity in this to connect and meet either in person or via Zoom or by phone with the alum that you're working with. So that's the process. I really have, I'll just show a couple more slides and then we'll come back for any other questions. So this is the Rossier Career Network page. This is what it'll look like when it says to join. You have the little green join button there. And once you join, you'll have tabs next to about that include mentor, and that's where you can check out your mentors. So this is what the join page looks like. That platform also enables you to build community. So there's a number of groups. I've included a slide here on the group section. So here are the groups that are included in the platform. I encourage you to check that out, communicate with one another, communicate with alumni in those platforms. And so once you're in those groups, you can actually you can post discussion board questions, and you can reply to other people's responses. The more people we have engaged in this platform, the more we can get out of this experience. So I encourage you all to take a look at that. And then here are additional networking resources to be aware of them. I've shared this previously for many of you that have gone through immersion and orientation programs, presentations this last year, some other career resources to be aware of. And with that, I'll break and we'll open up some time for additional questions. All right, I've talked a lot. Are there questions about kind of the second half of those slides? The mentor matching or the alumni reviewer matching or other observations? Are we just overwhelmed? That was too much information?
I hope that everyone does take advantage of the resume review. I think our alumni want to help you all, and Ryan's doing so much work behind the scenes in order to connect you all. So not only to get a review of your resume, but also just to connect with someone in your industry. So hopefully you'll take advantage of it. And we will send out all of these instructions tomorrow, exactly how Ryan perfectly laid it out in that slide. We'll make sure that we send it out via email. If you have any questions, you can let us know.
Very good. It's a daunting process. And if you feel overwhelmed by this, I could see some of your faces, but not everybody's faces. If you feel overwhelmed, take a deep breath, come meet with me. You've got other resources you can meet with, talk to your faculty members. They're certainly available, but take a step at a time. So if you've come out of this realizing, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of stuff to do on my resume, there will be, and if you don't feel like between now and the 9th, you can get things together to get that review. I want to be sure, you're thoughtful in this process. We're encouraging to have some time to do that edit, but there will be other opportunities to get that feedback too. So we certainly want to encourage people to take part in that. But the other thing is, you've got a better sense of your time and what you can accomplish. The most important thing is you spend a little bit of time each week based on where you're at to not forget that career prep step. And so you really got to think through, like, what am I expecting when I get to graduation? When do I need to start my search? And we wanted to really start this discussion with resumes to be sure you've got a solid footing there. And we can have more conversations based on your all interest. And it seems, because again, heads were nodding with the consulting conversations, we're trying to put stuff out there that are going to be useful for a lot of you. But talk to us about it. Don't think I'm the only one that has this question, or I'm the only one facing this challenge. Faculty are there. Faculty have a lot of great insights into the areas that our alums are going into as well, and your advisors are there as great resources. So take advantage of all of that support. What you shouldn't do is, there's that stress factor. I want to encourage people, it's okay to be stressed, so long as you use that stress to take you into action and not to curl up in a little ball. So if you're in the curl up in a little ball mode, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. We can develop a plan. But great, thank you so much. I appreciate, Jordan, all your efforts in helping to organize this session. And thank you everybody for participating. It was a pleasure spending some time with you.
Thank you so much, Ryan, on behalf of both of our programs, the EDL and the OCL program. We're so grateful for your time and for your expertise, and are excited too for more programming in the future. So for everyone here, this isn't going to be the last session that we do. We're going to continue the momentum with career planning. And Ryan, if you could please send me information about that consulting event you're going to have next month, so we can just kind of help publicize that. I think that could be a really cool event for hopefully all of you to go to as well. So thank you so much, Ryan, and wishing you all a great week ahead.
Fight on.
Fight on.